Hi, folks. So my name is Sascha, and this is Michael Rhodes, and we're launching a new format called 30 Minutes with a Modern Mystic. Obviously, Michael is the modern mystic, and I'm the one asking questions in this. Bear with us if there is a good sense of humor in this, because
I'm not convinced about this. You look more like a modern mystic than I do.
Yeah, right. And so the first topic for today is climate change and cataclysms. Could there be anything more controversial than this?
Oh my God, I mean, this mystic's supposed to answer this, talk about this.
Yeah.
Okay, well, climate change, yes, there is climate change. There's no question about that. But tell me, has there ever been a period without climate change? I mean, we're talking about this as though it's new. We're talking about it as if it's something that's never happened before. So that's I don't accept that at all. If there was not for climate change, Sascha would now be sitting under about half a mile of ice, and we would not be having this conversation because he'd be frozen, and the technology that allows this wouldn't have happened. But we had climate change, and sure, it was a bit slower than our present one, and it allowed trees to grow. About 15,000 years ago, as the ice melted, trees began to grow, but that was climate change. If you go back into the history of the planet Earth, and we're going back a long time, in my metaphysical travels, I'm aware there was greater periods of time with people living at the two poles than there was living at the equator. But right now, the poles are not easy to live at, and the equator is, well, that's a bit different equation altogether.
Now, I'm familiar with when you say metaphysical travel, I'm familiar with what you're talking about, but maybe some of the listeners are not. So would you shortly talk about, if possible, shortly about metaphysical travel? What does it mean? Why are you able to metaphysically travel, and why can you travel to the past? As this might sound pretty strange to some.
Hey, this is about conversations with a modern mystic, right? So that's what it means. I learned long ago to metaphysically travel. In other words, we have astral projection, or OOPE, and that means you can come out of your body, and as you do every night, you can come out of your body while the body's sleeping, and then you're in what I call like a spherical time. All time occupies the same moment. And so I thought, well, if you can do this, and I did that, I learned to do that. If you can do this while you're asleep, then equally it's possible to do it while you're awake. It's just a consciousness thing. And so with practice, I found that I could indeed leave my body. I could hear, I could write, I could be aware, maybe, let's say 10% of my consciousness stayed with the body. So I could write down, but I could write what I was experiencing in a completely different reality zone. We're metaphysical beings. You know, we're not bodies. We're metaphysical beings with a body.
So you're saying we. So that means each one of us is capable of metaphysical travel as you experience it.
Absolutely. Each one has the potential. First of all, the first handicap is fear. Now, I think we're going through a stage of life at the moment that is revealing to us the magnitude of human fear. And that's
an interesting bridge when you say it's revealing the dimension or the extent of fear. Would this also come through cataclysms?
Very good. Cataclysms. I suspect that we've all been through the last 200,000 years. I suspect that many of us have been swallowed up by earthquakes. And when the island we lived on came to the boil, we joined the soup and didn't particularly enjoy it. And so cataclysms are something that I think is deeply that holds terror for humanity. I think it's deeply in our field of in our fear. But our fear is magnified by our thoughts. We think fearfully. We imagine fearfully. And this is reality. And this is why we're in the soup we're in now. And so fear is so much part of our life that it's being revealed to us now. And as metaphysical beings, we all have that potential, but we're not all about to experience that potential because of fear. People are frightened of the unknown. So we do not like change because we don't like the unknown.
Right. Okay. And so you're mentioning fear as one of the main influences on planet Earth right now. And also you mentioned the creative aspect of fear shortly. So would that mean that fear could also, or other energies, other emotions, or whatever you want to call them, could also have caused climate change and cataclysms?
Well, that's an interesting question, because we don't see ourselves as anything to do with the earth or the weather.
Right.
And I would put it to you, for instance, that right now we're in climate change, and you notice that it's negative. It's a negative climate change. It is against our best interests. Everywhere it is not making life easier for us. Well, we are negative, hugely negative. You know, the field of negativity, of the human field of negativity is massive. It's like a dark metaphysical cloud that hangs over the earth. And I'm sorry, but in every moment of your life, you are creating the content and direction at every moment of your life. Now, when you get the human collective consciousness is based in fear and is negative, then we do affect the weather, and we do affect the climate, and we do affect the earth. You know, there's no question about that. We do create winds and tornadoes that kill us because we're deaf on ourselves. So all this we create, but we don't take responsibility for it.
Interesting.
We deny it.
Okay.
We deny it. And so if we were self-loving, hang on a minute, young man, if we were loving ourselves, we would have created a climate change, would have been so beneficial. It would have been so beneficial to everybody. But self-hate is so common in the human consciousness. How is the weather therefore going to give us something that lifts us when we're all the time pushing ourselves down?
So given what you said, that consciousness creates positive or negative climate change, what role does, pollution, in whatever facet it comes, whether it's through emissions or whatever it is, what role does all of this play?
I get it. That comes from our thinking. Our thinking is we don't create ash, which goes up into the air and collapses harmlessly. We create negative, fearful, sabotaging energy, and that energy creates everything around us. So we are the creators of not only our life, but everything involved in our life.
So that basically means that our physical, if I get you right, and you may correct me if I'm wrong, that our physical contamination, whether it's in terms of, carbon dioxide or whatever it is, is a result of our polluted thinking. So we have physical pollution as a result of our polluted mental body. Is that a way? Would that be a way to say it?
Human thinking, especially en masse, certainly in many individuals that don't belong in this, but en masse, it is toxic. And there you go. So we create the toxicity on this planet. And it's the same in the oceans. Now, the oceans tend to represent more our emotions, the oceans and the rivers and the lakes. And most of them, how many could you now drink out of the lakes and the rivers? Very, very, very few. So they're polluted. Our emotions are also toxic. I'm not saying this is bad and wrong and we shouldn't be like this in a judgment. This is where we're at, and it's not good enough. What we're going through had to happen.
In other words, if we had a consciousness that had more love for ourselves, we would have had more love for the planet, for nature, and therefore would have come up with technologies and inventions that would not have polluted the world.
Exactly right. If we had the sense of the smell of a wolf, which I've read is 10,000 times greater than ours, which is a serious amount, then we would not create cities that we couldn't live in the pollution, the smell. We couldn't live in the smell. So we would have done it all differently. But we do have our toxic thoughts, and so we've created a toxic world. And therefore, it's rather like if you pee in your bed, you have to lay in it until you get up in the morning. Well, we have been fouling our bed now for a long time.
Now, the next question that would come up is, for me at least, does the planet care? Does nature care? Or is that too much of a projection of human thinking and feeling onto nature and the planet? If we think, okay, does nature feel bad about all this pollution? Does the planet, because there's so many ideas, there are people saying the planet, Mother Earth is going to wants revenge and all this nonsense, whatever. Just curious about your perspective.
Personally, care is the wrong word. The earth and nature is aware, but care is not the word. Nature and the earth give to us what we put out and we get back. And so the care is not the word. There is no, if you walk in the forest and a branch falls and kills a wood chopper, then some people say that is retribution. No, it isn't. No, it isn't at all. The wood chopper could well have felt guilt about what they're doing purely for money. And nothing happens by accident, nothing by chance. And so there is no retribution in nature, but there is cause and effect. So what we put out there, when you get it, that humanity is one consciousness. So each person is humanity. Each person is the world. And so as we have a relationship with ourselves, we have a relationship with the world. And so many people do have a violent mental and emotional relationship with themselves. It is such a common phrase. I was so angry with myself. And so that means you're angry with the world. So the world then is reflecting back to you anger because you are the creator. And we are here to learn creation. That everything we're doing.
Okay, to me, what you're saying would indicate that to fix climate change, or to fix, might not be the right word to use in that context, but to work on climate change, the best thing we can do is to work on ourselves and to first fix the climate in ourselves before, and then probably as a result, everything would change. So what do you make of this whole climate change activism? There's so much, save the whales, save the trees, do this, do that. And it's all based in the outside world. What do you make of all of this?
It's also based in fear. Now, that's an interesting one because the people care. There's no doubt the people involved in all this, save the whale, save the yellow bird-winged butterfly, etc., they really care. And I have to say, they do a magnificent job. Many of them dedicate their lives to this, and I completely honor that. But there is a theme here that doesn't get looked at. Consciousness draws to itself physical form through which to express. And so consciousness is not the physical form, that is the form through which it expresses. And so it will say, save the whales. Now, whales are an amazing expression of consciousness. So we see the physical form and think that if that's taken, if we kill it all, then that can't express. There is certain truth in that, but we do not run the world. And so when a species, it goes so-called extinct, there is no such thing as extinction because there is no such thing as death. And so when an animal species becomes extinct, what has happened? Consciousness has withdrawn the consciousness. So the form has to drop away. And we think we're doing that. I'm sorry, but we're not yet the creators of life on Earth. We simply mess it up. And so the consciousness withdraws. Then we say that's extinct. Well, on one page in the vast book of life, you could say, yes, it is, but you can't extinct consciousness. Consciousness is. And so if nature would like that animal back, we lost it on page 25 in the book of life, and on page 225, it's appropriate for the whales to come back. Consciousness will bring the whales back into form on this planet or any other. We are creators here, but we're learning creation. And so we live within the limits of our abilities. What we do not have is enough humbleness. We are far, far too arrogant in our view of life. Intellectual arrogance has lost us, and we've lost our intelligence and wisdom.
Now, there are two questions that came up while you were talking. Now, the first one would be, has humanity ever gone extinct according to your metaphysical discoveries?
Never.
Okay. I mean, when I say extinct, I mean withdrawn from the physical form.
Humanity withdraws from the physical form all the time, of course. We're metaphysical beings. All nature is metaphysical. So extinction doesn't happen. Because it loses physical form, there's no such thing as extinction, any more than there's any such thing as death. This is where science gets bogged down and
right.
Lost in its own stupid cleverness. Stupid holds hands, clever holds hands with stupid, and they're inclined to forget that. But that's beside the point. And so what was that question?
If humanity has ever gone extinct according to your metaphysical discoveries, by the definition that you gave us, so that consciousness withdrew completely from the human form.
So let's say we're looking at the river of life. It's a tremendous river as far as you can see each way. And let's say there's a boat in the river. That boat represents the 8 billion people will say here now. That represents us. The river represents the people who are not here now. The river represents humanity out in our solar system, in our future and in our past, because they're all happening at the same moment. And so that has never been extinct. But clusters, certain tribes and cultures have become extinct, but never out of timing. Okay. And yet, of course, it never becomes extinct. The expression of certain languages have become extinct. I believe there was once about 1,200 in New Guinea. Well, I guess they find that 3 or 4 is enough.
And so we have this whole thing about extinction, from an early age, we're always taught through television and through teachers, and that extinction is something bad, and that to feel sorry for those animals, to feel,
extinction is forever.
Right, and then we take on this pattern of feeling sorry for whether it's a tree, whether it's an animal, or whatever, and it's almost like we look at it through the human perception, through the human lens of thinking, right? And so it seems that all of this is flawed. It's all based on the wrong assumptions, right?
It's all illusion. Somebody in America on an island introduced me to grandfather tree, grandmother tree, mother tree, father tree, and a few auntie trees. And I sat there with a stupid grin plastered on my face and let it happen.
Now, you mentioned your metaphysical travels, and I'm curious as to in your metaphysical discoveries that you made on your journeys, is there any other species, or how would you, I'm not sure if you would refer to humanity as a species, but let's just call it species, or let's call it a flow of energy maybe, or whatever you want to call it.
Species.
Yeah, species. Is there any other species that is so lost in an illusion and also with so much arrogance and all of that you mentioned? Is it okay?
Now, there are about 300 levels, 300 different frequencies of humanity on 3 dimensions. They're not even in that river. That's just the one we're on. And so you can begin to realize there's a lot going on out there. Now, there is lower than us and there is higher than us. We don't go through them all because each one of us are in the perfect classroom for us. And so that happens with us. Now, there are other species that have exactly the same experience. And so let's talk about for a moment the cabal. Now, they are high-tech, long-lived because of intervention, long-lived so-called humans. They've lost their love, they've lost compassion. So they're actually what you'd call a very high-tech, but very low-frequency human being. Now, they have with them some of the reptilians. So in the reptilian, there is at least 3 levels of lower tech, but high frequency, and higher tech and high frequency, and then low frequency, high tech. And often high tech and low frequency go together, as with us. We've got quite a high technology for the stupidity that we portray, with all love to humanity. I mean, we're not the smartest, sharpest blinking knife in the drawer at the moment. And so it's not just with us. And then there are other beings where the whole species have gone way beyond that. And so there are quite a few that are like us, struggling, and a lot of them feed on negativity. And particularly, I guess it's got a good flavor, human negativity. Because let me add something here. Our negativity is filled with an emotion. And of all the species I've encountered, I have never encountered a species that has the depth and the breadth of human emotions. We're emotionally quite unique and to our advantage, actually, but that makes a very savory soup when it's very negative for very negative beings.
It's interesting. It sounds like through the emotional depth that humanity experiences, we also have such a depth of creations that we can go through, right? Because you connected thoughts and emotions as the process of creation, basically, that we live through. And so does the depth of emotions also define, in a way, our vastness of experiences that we can create?
Yeah, I think I get what you're saying here. Our emotions and our mental body is not really evolving. As a species, we've become subconscious. Not every person, there's millions who are not, but as a species, we've become pretty well subconscious. That's the end of evolution. You cannot subconsciously grow in consciousness. And evolution is the evolution of consciousness. We're here as the creative evolution of consciousness. Nature is here as a natural evolution of consciousness and is doing its part very well. And so it's considered today, and I can verify this metaphysically, it's very rare a person has an original thought today. They thought it in other lifetimes. The language has changed, the context changed, but the same negative anxiety, worry mode has continued with us for tens of thousands of years now, hundreds of thousands of years, many incarnations. We're not really evolving in the way we could. So nature, so life, so the cosmos said, let's give them a smack of the head and let's start again. We're not going to wipe them out, but we're going to give them a chance. Some move on, some repeat the lessons. And that's where we're at. And that's mental and emotional bodies involved. Physical, I mean, that just comes and goes. Okay. But the metaphysical is the spiritual, the emotional, and the mental. The mental being the weakest, our spiritual being the strongest, but of emotions and the mental, emotions are far more powerful.
Right, and that's probably something special about humanity or humans in general, that they have such a strong emotional body, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's completely screwed up for a lot of people.
Right. And going back to the initial topic of climate change and cataclysms, so the clap on the head that you just mentioned now, would come through cataclysms as well, right? I guess.
Cataclysms do bring about change, because you can't continue in the same way.
Right.
So regardless of what the cataclysm is, in a way, a world war is a cataclysm. And it's well known, like the British were the healthiest they've ever been in 100 years during that, because they were always hungry. And now they're overweight, obese like Australia, like the Americans. So our health has gone way down. And this is interesting. COVID, which was released into us deliberately, our health was right down. Our health has never been worse in humanity than it is right now, in our level of humanity. So all this is happening. And yet we look on, he did it, they did it, we're doing it to ourselves. We are the creators. When you move into a victim consciousness, you create the victimizer in consciousness. And we did that a long time ago. So now we're learning that, hey, a lot of people, not only do I see myself as a victim, but I'm realizing I'm a victim of my own thoughts. And that's an essential part of the awakening, to realize that I'm victimizing myself. I need to change my relationship with myself. And that's part of the great awakening. And then they're moving at a completely different level. They are then growing in consciousness, this is all what it's all about.
Okay.
And so all forms of cataclysm can bring about change, absolutely, because it takes away more of the same for a little while.
Right. So in a way, we could say that because we resist our inner change, we create outer forces that bring about whatever is needed for us to get into a situation where we have the potential to change, even though most of us still don't, maybe. But and that
this is the basis of everything we call an accident in everybody's life, every misfortune, every coincidence, everything that seems to go against us is life trying to develop us and show us something, challenge us and grow us. But we always seem to look at the negative.
Okay. And so bringing in another buzzword, ascension. What's the relation between ascension that people are saying is happening right now, or we're going through or going towards the process of human ascension, at least for a part of humanity, and cataclysms and climate change? Does it push us towards ascension? What do you see in regards to those two topics? So, because in a way it's self-created, so do we push ourselves towards ascension, or is it something that is planned by nature to happen anyhow at this time? Because also there is so much.
There is no destiny. A lot of people say we come here with a program, with a contract, and we've got to see it through. I'm not saying there are no contracts, but basically no. We're here to learn what free will does and how to create. So number one thing we create is our own life. We create our life. And so it's an interesting paradox. Through cataclysm, you get the seed sown of ascension. Now, I'm certainly a very spiritual person, like many of the Indian saints, literally saints, who have developed an incredibly high level of a high frequency. They ascend naturally, many of them. So ascension can be natural, but ascension, what are we talking about? What is ascension? So ascension is the simple fact that as we look around, everything we see in our life has a frequency slower than the speed of light. And ascension means it's moving to a frequency higher than the speed of light. And so it simply moves out of the eyesight of us, but it's still there, but we can no longer see it, just as 99% of what we can't see is around us, which is something I'm heading into in my next book. It's there, but we can't see it. So we say it isn't there. And so I didn't really want to go here, but I learned just recently, no, it's okay, I learned recently about the fifth chamber in the heart. And as I learned it, it's sort of like it ignited something in me. And it began to bubble up through my insight and intuition more and more. In fact, it's made it so I've wrenched my leg now. So instead of avoiding writing my book, I'm going to have to sit down and, I've been avoiding writing my book. So now, because I've wrenched my leg, I'm going to have to take maybe 6 weeks to let it recover. And I'm going to have to sit and write. And because bubbling away is this fifth chamber of the heart. Because recently Pan said to me, this is the seed of ascension. Okay, so I want to follow that further because that sort of ignited me. Oh my God, the seed of ascension. I mean, that fifth chamber is known as the vagus node medically, but it is a chamber and it's amazing because it has, it's about 4 millimeters in diameter. That's how big it is or how tiny it is. And yet, whereas our body runs at 35 degrees Celsius, that has a temperature in there of 100 degrees Celsius. Why doesn't it burn us up? Why doesn't it burn a hole through the heart? Why doesn't it do something so clearly that energy at 100 degrees is metaphysical? And that then gets more and more intriguing because it makes you realize that maybe that's where the world is. Because there are many of those Indian sages, as I said, humanity is not in the world is in humanity. Well, you know, when the doctor last looked at me, he didn't find the world. But he didn't look in the fifth chamber of the heart. And as I look in it, I'm beginning to find the world. And I know the universe is there also. So this is something completely, something that just so turns me on. You wouldn't believe it. And I just can't wait to go into this and follow this. And it'll be in my next book that I'm going to write, this journey into the fifth chamber and where it takes me and what we do.
Wonderful.
And so cataclysm is like, when I heard about it, it was almost like cathartic to me. It was like a cataclysm. And so there are personal cataclysms as well as massive ones that everybody's aware of. We're heading into a massive one. All humanity's heading in it. We're in it. We can hear the thunder rolling, but the Big Bang hasn't yet happened.
Now, here's a last question. We might want to close today because the first one seems to have gone longer than 30 minutes already, but here we go.
I like this stuff. I really love it.
And we're just getting started. So are cataclysms and is climate change something unique to humans and the human experience and the human species and the human living conditions? Or is it something that all kinds of species throughout the cosmos experience at some point?
Well, as I understand it at the moment, right throughout our solar system, there is climate change. It's on the moon, it's on the sun. Now, I don't know whether there have been any human tourists there recently, but I don't really think they did it. I don't think we have polluted. We're polluting our space, sure. We're polluting our space, but then that's not you and I. It's the billionaire idiots that are doing that. But we are so change is going right through, not only through our solar system, it's in our galaxy. Our whole galaxy is going through change. We're part of that. We tend to think we're the center of the universe. We're not. We're one tiny part of the whole. But if in your body, let's put it this way, in your body, if one cell is in trouble, your body is in trouble. And that's what holistic medicine addresses, the whole body. We are a cell in the body of the universe, and we're in trouble. We're not about to. We're going through transformation. We're the caterpillar in the chrysalis, but we're a very troubled caterpillar. And so we're agitated, we're disturbed, and we are putting out some strange energy. And so this affects the universe.
Okay, how about closing on a positive note? Is there anything you'd like to share? Something
Yes.
we can, something practical we can do about climate change, about cataclysms, personal cataclysms, global cataclysms, cosmic cataclysms.
Everything changes because you are the universe and you change you. And so every situation you're in, every person who aggravates you, every argument that you feel you've got to win, all of it, just back off and consciously for yourself choose love. And when you're choosing love for yourself, you are choosing love for all humanity, for all nature, for all the world. It doesn't matter who they are, you're choosing love because you are humanity, you are the world. Choose love, be love, live love, and begins with you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you.
My pleasure.